Welcome back.
Dobrodošli nazad.
I am Dr. Sandoval
Ja sam dr. Sandoval.
and bringing to you the law of life.
Donosim vam zakon života.
Let's get right into this day's session.
Hajmo da nastavimo ovo predavanje.
Remember, last time we were looking at the cells and their function,
Sećate se, zadnji put smo govorili o ćeliji i njenoj funkciji.
and we discovered that it is through the spirit that spiritual information is brought to the brain.
I otkrili smo da kroz duhovne stvari se unose u mozak.
That when that spiritual power strikes the physical structure of the brain,
Kada ta duhovna sila dotakne fizički mozak,
it generates electrical impulses
ono stvara električni impuls
that are then sent down the nerves to the various different parts of the body
i oni su poslati kroz nerve u sve delove tela
to control their function.
da kontrolišu njihovu funkciju.
And we ask the question,
I onda postavljamo pitanje
what is the foundation of that spiritual information
koji je temelj ove duhovne informacije
that will lead to the proper function in the body?
koja će voditi do pravilne funkcije u telu.
And the answer is,
I odgovor je,
it's love.
to je ljubav.
It's love.
To je ljubav.
Love is a spiritual information.
Ljubav je duhovna informacija.
It's a spiritual power.
To je duhovna sila.
Now, it's not physical.
Nije fizička.
There's no atoms and protons and neutrons and electrons in love.
Nema atoma, neurona, protona u ljubavi.
It doesn't have a weight.
Nema težinu.
It doesn't have a density.
Nema gustinu.
It's not physical.
I nije fizička.
It's spiritual.
Ona je duhovna.
Right? And it comes through our spirit.
I ona dolazi kroz naš duh.
So the brain and everything that it's attached to
I mozak i sve što je vezano s njom,
is the body.
to je telo.
Then you have the spirit.
I onda imate duh.
And the combination of the two make up the mind.
I kombinacija tog dvoje stvara um.
Now the mind is more than the brain.
Znači, um je više nego mozak.
Because the mind can change the structure of the brain.
Može da promeni strukturu mozga.
We know that by changing one's thoughts,
Mi znamo kada promenimo nečije misli,
that you can change the physical structure of the brain.
možete da promenite i fizičku strukturu mozga.
So the brain itself is manipulated by the mind.
Mozak sam po sebi je manipulisan umom.
And the mind is the thing that can think.
I je taj koji može da misli.
You take away the brain,
I uzmite mozak,
no thinking.
nema razmišljanja.
You take away the spirit,
Uzmite duh,
no thinking.
nema razmišljanja.
Only when the two come together
Jedino kada su njih dvoje zajedno,
do you have that function of thought.
imate tu funkciju misli.
Right? Just like a computer must have software and hardware together.
Kao i kompjuter koji mora da ima softver i hardver zajedno.
Now that we understand the cells and their functions better,
Sada kada razumemo ćeliju i njenu funkciju bolje,
let's look at the different causes of dysfunction.
hajmo sad da gledamo različite uzroke disfunkcije.
One of the causes of dysfunction is inheritance.
Jedna od uzrok disfunkcije je nasledstvo.
Inherited diseases
Nasledne bolesti
are diseases that manifest in the individual
su bolesti koji se manifestuju kod osobe
as a result of the changes in the genetic code of one's parents.
dešavaju se genetskim promjenama kod nečijih roditelja.
Right? And which manifest regardless of environmental or lifestyle factors.
Što je nezavisno od sredine i stila života kako osoba ima.
These include conditions like cystic fibrosis.
To je slučaj kao cistične fibroze.
Right? Conditions which lead to disease and early death.
Uzroci koji vode do rane smrti.
Despite every attempt to cure it.
Bilo kako vi da pokušate to da iscelite.
These inherited conditions are problematic.
Ove nasledne bolesti su problematične
Because you cannot remove the cause.
jer ne možete da otklonite uzrok.
Because the cause is in a prior generation.
Uzrok je u prošloj generaciji.
And you cannot remove the secondary causes.
I ne možete da promenite drugorazredne uzroke.
Because the secondary cause,
Jer drugorazredni uzrok,
the messed up DNA,
poremećeni DNK
is in every cell of the body.
je u svakoj ćeliji tela.
And you and I don't have the capacity to fix every cell of the body.
I mi nemamo kapacitet da popravimo svaku ćeliju u telu.
Let's imagine that you figured out how to fix that dysfunction in the cell.
Hajmo da kažemo da ste vi uspeli da nađete način kako da popravite ćeliju.
And you were really fast.
I vi ste jako brzi.
Every second you could pull out a cell, fix it, and put it back.
I vi svaki put možda popravite ćeliju i da vratite unutra.
And the next second you could pull out another cell, fix it, and put it back.
I uzmete sledeću ćeliju, popravite i vratite unutra.
By the time you got done going through all of your body,
I kad završite sa celim telom,
it would be millions of years later.
to će biti milioni godina kasnije.
You would never survive.
Nikad ne bi preživali.
So this definition is different than saying that a condition is genetic.
Znači, ova definicija je drugačija nego da je genetika.
Many diseases in one way or another are genetic.
Sve bolesti su na jedan ili drugi način genetske.
Because in order for them to manifest the disease,
Jer da bi se bolest manifestovala,
they must dysregulate or mutate proper genes,
oni moraju da mutiraju određene gene.
or they must express improper genes.
Ili moraju da izlože određene gene.
So we draw a difference between the two.
I moramo da razlučimo između tih dvoje.
Inherited conditions represent about 1, maybe 2% of diseases.
Nasledne bolesti su otprilike 1 do 2% svih bolesti.
A second cause for dysfunction that we must consider
Drugi uzrok koji moramo da prihvatimo,
is environment.
to je naša sredina ili okolina.
You see, every cell of your body lives within a particular environment.
Svaka ćelija u našem telu živi u određenoj sredini.
You must have a particular pressure.
Mora da imate određeni pritisak,
You must have a particular temperature.
određenu temperaturu
And there's a certain amount of radiation that you can tolerate.
i određena količina radijacije koju možete da tolerišete.
And if you have too much pressure,
I ako imate previše pritiska,
like you get hit by a car,
ako vas automobil udari
or somebody shoots you with a bullet,
ili vas neko upuca sa metkom,
then there's dysfunction.
onda je to disfunkcija.
You can have too much temperature,
Možete imate previše temperature,
like putting your hand on the stove,
stavite ruku na ringlu,
or you can have too little temperature,
ili nemate dovoljno temperature,
like sticking your tongue on the metal pole outside in the cold.
ili ližete metalnu šipku koja je zaleđena.
I'm sure children in your country have never done that.
Ja sam siguran da deca u ovoj zemlji nikad to nisu radila.
Only in the United States,
Samo u Sjedinjenim državama.
right? And we also can have dysfunction because of radiation.
I možemo da imamo disfunkciju zbog radijacije.
You go into a nuclear reactor,
Uđete u nuklearni reaktor,
well, you're going to die,
umrećete,
right? Because you can have dysfunction because of these environmental issues.
jer možete da imate disfunkciju zbog ovih problema okoline.
These environmental issues can cause localized dysfunction.
Ove problemi okoline imaju lokalnu disfunkciju.
You can have too much pressure because of a hammer,
Možda imate previše pritiska zbog čekića
and that can impact one finger,
i ono može da utiče na jedan
but
prst,
the other fingers are okay.
ali drugi prsti su u redu.
You can burn one foot,
Možete da izgorite jedan prst
but the other foot's okay,
ili stopalo, a drugo stopalo je u redu.
right? So you can have localized dysfunction with environmental problems,
Znači, možete da imate lokalnu disfunkciju u okolini.
right? Now, there's a third cause that we must consider,
Postoji i treća tačka koju moramo da sagledamo,
and that cause is the raw materials.
a to su sirovine.
You see, you might have things like toxins.
Vi možda imate nešto kao toksini.
You might have the wrong raw materials,
Pogrešne sirovine možete da imate,
right? You might have poisons,
ili da imate otrove,
or you might have envenomations,
ili neka trovanja od zmija,
like snake bites,
kao ugrizi otrovnih zmija.
right? Or you can have dysfunction because you have too high or too low levels of things you do need.
Ili može da imate disfunkciju ako imate previše ili premalo sirovina koje su vam potrebne.
And all of those can cause dysfunction
I sve to može da prouzrokuje disfunkciju
in your cells.
u vašim ćelijama.
A fourth cause of dysfunction
I četvrti uzrok disfunkcije
is energy.
je energija.
Right? That energy that is communicated via your nervous system to the cells of your body.
Znači, ta energija, ona komuniše kroz vaš nervni sistem u sve delove tela.
Now, it might better be described as control or regulation.
Ono može bolje da se objasni kao kontrola ili jedna vrsta regulacije.
But this control or regulation can be very specific, very localized.
Ali ova kontrola može da bude lokalna i specifična.
Because your brain, your nervous system is set up in a very specific way.
Jer vaš nervni sistem je na određeni način postavljen.
You have one spot in your brain here
Imate jednu tačku u mozgu
that controls one location in your body over here.
koji kontroliše jednu lokaciju na vašem telu.
You have another spot in your brain over up here
Imate drugu lokaciju, jednu tačku na mozgu ovde,
that will control another part of your body over here.
koji će kontrolisati neki drugi deo tela.
So in the cortex of the brain,
I u korteksu mozga,
the outside portion of the brain,
to je spoljašnji deo mozga,
there is a map of the entire body.
postoji mapa celoga tela
And electrical impulses that come to or begin at a specific spot in the brain
Znači, električni impulsi koji počinju u određenoj tački u mozgu
will be carried down to control specific spots in the body.
će proći kroz određene delove tela koji kontrolišu.
Right? So let's unpack this a little bit.
Hajmo malo da otvorimo ovo sve.
Let us imagine that you have somebody that has heart disease.
Hajmo da kažem neko ko ima bolest srca.
And they go to the doctor because they're having chest pain.
I oni idu kod doktora, imaju bolest u grudima.
And the doctor sends them to the hospital.
I doktor ih odvede u bolnicu.
The hospital does a test
Bolnica radi ispitivanja.
where they inject dye into the blood vessels feeding the heart.
I znači oni ubrizgavaju jednu boju u mišiće koji hrane srce.
And they take x-rays while the dye is in there.
I oni uzimaju slike rentgena dok je boja prisutna.
And they tell you that you have a blockage in 3 parts of the arteries.
I oni vam kažu da imate zakrčenje u 1/3 arterije.
One blockage is 90% blocked.
Jedno zakrčenje je 90%,
The other one is about 75% blocked.
a drugo je 75%,
And the third one is only about 35% blocked.
a treći je 35% zakrčeno.
So they put a stent in the 90% one
I oni stavljaju stent tamo da je 90% zakrčeno
in order to open it up
da bi ga otvorili,
so that you can get good blood flow.
da bi imali dobar krvotok.
Now, what is the cause for that blockage?
I šta je uzrok tom zakrčenju?
Well, you might say it's cholesterol,
Može da kažemo da je holesterol,
but is it cholesterol?
ali da li je holesterol?
Now, undoubtedly, cholesterol is in the plaque,
Nema sumnje da je holesterol u plaku,
but is cholesterol the cause for the plaque development?
ali da li je holesterol uzrok što je nastao plak?
Well, let me ask you this.
Hajde da vam postavim jedno pitanje.
What is the concentration of cholesterol
Šta je koncentracija holesterola
in the blood
u krvi
before, at, and after that plaque?
pre, u toku i posle tog plaka?
Well, it's going to be essentially the same
Biće ista.
because substances will come into an equal concentration in the bloodstream.
Znači, supstance će doći u istoj koncentraciji kroz krvotok.
There's a law that governs that,
Postoji zakon koji to vodi.
right? And it's the law of diffusion.
To je zakon difuzije.
Right? And so the concentration of cholesterol before the plaque is the same as at the plaque.
Znači, koncentracija holesterola pre plaka i posle plaka je ista.
So what caused the cholesterol to accumulate right there in the plaque?
I šta uzrokuje da se holesterol baš akumulira tu, gde je plak?
The cholesterol can't be the cause.
Holesterol ne može da bude uzrok.
The cholesterol is only the cofactor.
Holesterol je samo kofaktor.
Right? It has to be there in order to collect,
On mora da bude prisutan
but it's
da bi
not
se skupio,
but it's not the thing causing the collection.
ali on nije taj koji je uzrokovao da se skupi.
There has to be something else.
Mora da postoji nešto drugo.
Well, when we look at these causes of dysfunction,
Kada gledamo ove uzroke disfunkcije,
it cannot be number one.
ne može biti broj 1,
It's not inheritance.
nije nasledno,
Because every cell in your arteries will have the same messed up DNA.
jer svaka ćelija u toj arteriji će imati pogrešan DNK.
It can't be the third cause
Ne može biti i treći,
because the concentration of the cholesterol is the same throughout the cardiovascular system.
jer koncentracija holesterola je ista u celom kardiovaskularnom sistemu.
So there has to be something else that causes it to concentrate.
Mora da postoji još nešto što ga prouzrokuje.
So you're only left with number 2 or number 4.
Jedino vam je ostalo broj 2 ili broj 4.
There could be some kind of environmental issue
Može da bude neki problem sa okolinom
that then leads to inflammation,
koji dovodi do upale,
that then causes the accumulation of the cholesterol that's there,
što dolazi do skupljanja ili akumulacije holesterola koje su tu,
or
ili
it could be an energy issue.
može da bude problem sa energijom.
You have a specific nerve that goes to that specific location in the artery,
Imate određeni nerv koji ide do te lokacije u arteriji
and you could have a signal sent through that nerve to that location
i imate signal koji ide do tog nerva, do te lokacije,
that then leads to inflammation
koji onda vodi do inflamacije
and the accumulation of cholesterol
i skupljanja holesterola
and the plaque development.
i razvoju plaka.
So what might cause plaque to develop there
Ono što može da uzrokuje da se razvije plak
through the nervous system?
kroz nervni sistem.
Well, I'll tell you this,
Reći ću vam ovo,
it won't be love,
to neće biti ljubav.
because love will not lead to dysfunction.
Jer ljubav ne vodi do disfunkcije.
It must be something that is not love.
Mora da postoji nešto što nije ljubav.
That's the foundation of the thinking
To je temelj razmišljanja
communicated through the nervous system to that spot
koji komunicira kroz nervni sistem do tog mesta,
that leads to the accumulation of cholesterol there in that spot.
koji vodi do akumulacije holesterola na tom mestu.
Right. There is an interesting study or series of studies
Postoje interesantna serija istraživanja
that were done between 2000 and 2013.
koja je urađena između 2000 i 2013.
The investigators were studying mice,
Istraživači su istraživali miša
and they were testing a particular substance
i oni su testirali određenu supstancu
that they thought might be able to be used as an anti-inflammatory medication.
i oni su testirali jednu stvar koja bi bila protivupalni lek.
Now, one of the tests that they do with the mice
I jedan test koji su radili sa mišom,
is to take a needle
uzeli su iglu
and to inject some of that substance
i da ubrizgaju tu supstancu
in the fluid around the brain.
u tečnost koja se nalazi oko mozga.
Right? The reason they do this
Razlog zašto oni to čine,
is to see what will happen
žele da vide šta će se desiti
if the medication gets across the blood-brain barrier.
ako lek prođe membranu krvi.
Now, something interesting happened.
Nešto interesantno se desilo.
The mice stopped producing a prominent inflammatory molecule
Miš je prestao da proizvodi molekulu za upalu,
but that molecule was not produced in the brain.
ali ta molekula se ne proizvodi u mozgu,
It's produced elsewhere in the body,
negde se drugde proizvodi,
but they couldn't find the medication elsewhere in the body.
ali oni nigde nisu drugde mogli da nađu taj lek u telu.
So what was going on?
Šta se dešava?
Well, they didn't know.
Oni nisu znali.
So they had to go back to study for more years.
I oni su nastavili da proučavaju to više godina.
And what they discovered was this.
I ono što su zaključili je ovo.
When that substance was injected around the brain,
Kad je ta supstanca ubrizgana u mozak,
it changed the signal that was being sent from the brain
promenio je signal koji bi je poslat od mozga
down the vagus nerve
do vagus nerva,
to the spleen.
do slezine.
In the spleen,
U slezini
that signal was received by certain types of immune cells.
i u slezini taj signal je primljen od neke grupe imunih ćelija,
Right, white blood cells.
belih krvnih zrnaca,
And those went and communicated with another type of white blood cells.
i oni su komunicirali sa drugim belim krvnim zrncima
And that last type of white blood cells
i taj posljedan tip belih krvnih zrnaca
stopped producing that inflammatory molecule.
prestao je da proizvodi taj upalni molekulu.
Oh, interesting.
Interesantno.
So signals from the brain
Signali iz mozga
can change how the immune system functions.
mogu da promene kako imunni sistem funkcioniše.
Well, the investigators didn't stop there.
Istraživači se nisu ovde zaustavili,
They questioned
oni su se pitali
whether they could cause the same thing to happen
da li će se ista stvar desiti
by using an electrical device
koristeći električni predmet
to stimulate that vagus nerve a particular way
da stimuliše taj vagus nerv na određeni način,
so that it might cause the same response.
da može da prouzrokuje isti odgovor.
And it did.
I on je to učinio.
Right? It did.
On je učinio to, da.
And they got very excited about that.
I oni su se jako uzbudili zbog toga.
And they started thinking about other ways that they could do, that they could treat things.
I oni su razmišljali o drugim stvarima koje mogu da tretiraju.
For example, let's say
Na
you
primer.
have arthritis in this knee.
Imate artritis u ovom kolenu.
And you can't tolerate anti-inflammatory pain medications well
Ne možete da tolerišete lekove protiv upale,
because
dobro,
it messes up your stomach.
jer to poremeti vaš stomak.
If they could develop a device
I ako mogu da razviju jednu mašinu
and identify the nerves that go to the knee
koje mogu identifikuju nerve koji idu do kolena
and use that device to change the electrical impulse to the knee,
i ako ta sprava može da promijeni električni impuls u kolenu,
they might be able to change the function of cells in the knee
oni će moći da promene funkciju u kolenu,
to produce their own anti-inflammatory chemicals
da ono samo proizvodi svoje protivupalne hemikalije
and decrease the inflammation in the knee
i smanji upal u kolenu
without the side effects of the medication.
bez nuspojava lekova.
Oh, very exciting.
Jako uzbudljivo.
But how do you and I control that function normally?
Ali kako vi i ja tu funkciju normalno možemo da kontrolišemo?
It's through our thoughts and our attitudes.
To je kroz naše misli i naš stav.
We control it unconsciously.
Mi ga nesvesno kontrolišemo.
Unconsciously.
Nesvesno.
Now, it's very interesting when it comes to cancer.
Jako interesantno kad je u pitanju rak.
We now know from the research
Sad znamo od istraživanja
that every step in the development, progression, and metastasis of cancer,
u svakom koraku razvitka do metastaze raka
there is input from the nervous system
postoji poruka iz nervnog sistema
and nerve-generated chemicals
i hemikalije koje se ustvaraju u nervima
that assist in the process of cancer development and growth.
koje asistiraju u razvoju i većanju raka.
And in fact, if you have a nerve going to the center of a tumor
I ako imate nerv koji ide u centar tumora
and you clip that nerve,
i odsečete ga
you change how the cancer behaves.
i vi sada menjate kako se rak ponaša.
So the nervous system has a very strong controlling, regulating function
I nervni sistem ima jak način da kontroliše funkciju
when it comes to cancer.
kad je u pitanju rak.
In fact, in my practice of medicine,
U stvari, u mom poslu radeći sa ljudima,
I have found that the vast majority of people with cancer,
ustanovio sam da velika većina ljudi koji ima rak,
they develop their cancer within a year or a few years of a major stressful event.
rak se manifestuje jako brzo posle nekog stresnog trenutka koji su imali u životu.
It's true for people with a bad lifestyle,
To je istinito za ljude koji imaju jako loš stil života
and it's true for those with a good lifestyle.
i istinito je za one koji imaju zdrav način života.
There's a major stressor
Postoji veliki stresor
that precedes the development of cancer.
koji dolazi pre razvitka raka.
Very interesting.
Jako interesantno.
Very interesting. Right. So let's look at our basic needs again, but we're going to study them from a slightly different perspective or an angle.
Ajmo sad da gledamo naše osnovne potrebe iz jednog druge perspektive.
Right. So we have various different needs.
Imamo razne potrebe.
Again, we need raw materials and we need energy.
Znači, potrebne su nam sirovine i energija.
And we need things like oxygen,
I potreban je kiseonik,
water,
voda,
nutrients,
hrana,
right? We need warmth.
potrebna je toplota,
We need sunshine.
sunčeva svetlost,
We need sleep.
spavanje.
Right? All of these are different things that we need.
To su sve različite stvari koje su nam potrebne.
But there must be an organ system that they function through.
Ali mora da postoji organ ili sistem kroz koji oni mogu da uđu.
A pathway into the body.
Znači, put isporuke.
So the pathway for oxygen
Znači, put isporuke za kiseonik
is the respiratory system,
su disajni putevi,
right?
pluća,
And the pathway for water
a put za vodu,
is your digestive system.
to je vaš digestivni sistem ili stomak.
The pathway for food is the same,
I isti je put i za hranu.
right? The pathway for the warmth is your skin,
Put za toplinu je vaša koža.
and the pathway for the sunshine is your eyes and your skin,
A put za sunčevu svetlost su oči i koža.
and the pathway for the sleep is your brain.
A za spavanje je mozak.
And of course, every cell of the body needs the results of this.
I znači, svaka ćelija je njoj potreban rezultat svega toga.
So those chemicals are going to be transported in the blood
Da bi te hemikalije mogle biti transportovane u krv
and taken to every part of the body
i odnete u sve delove tela,
so that it might function well.
da bi moglo da funkcioniše dobro.
Right? And the energy needs are going to be communicated via the nerves.
I energetske potrebe će biti komunicirane kroz nerve.
Now, we must consider the fact that we not only need certain things,
Moramo da shvatimo da nije samo da su nam potrebne određene stvari,
but we've got to bring them in.
moramo nekako da ih unesemo.
So what is the action that brings in the oxygen that the lungs need to breathe in order for you to live?
Koja je funkcija da kiseonik može da uđe u pluća da bi vi živeli?
It is breathing.
To je disanje.
What is the action of the stomach or the digestive system to bring in the water?
Koja je radnja stomaka da unese vodu?
It's drinking.
To je pijenje.
What's the action that brings in the food?
Koja je funkcija ili radnja za hranu kad smo u pitanju?
It's eating.
To je jedenje.
Right? What is the action that brings in the warmth?
A funkcija koja je potrebna da donese toplinu,
It's exposing or covering the skin.
znači da se izlažemo ili da pokrijemo kožu.
What is the action that brings in the sunshine?
Koja je funkcija ili radnja da bi doneli suncevu svetlost?
Well, it's exposing the skin,
Znači moramo da izložimo kožu suncu,
opening the eyes,
da otvorimo oči,
right? And the action that brings in the sleep,
a funkcija ili radnja koja donosi san, spavanje,
laying down,
da legnemo,
closing your eyes,
da zatvorimo oči.
right? Those are different actions that we must take.
To su razne radnje koje moramo da učinimo.
Now, what is the energy need that we have?
Koja je energetska potreba koja nama treba?
It's love.
To je ljubav.
That spiritual energy that we talked about.
To je duhovna energija o kojoj smo govorili.
Again, love is not physical, it's spiritual.
Znači, ljubav nije fizička, već je duhovna.
And the action that brings in the love
I radnja koja je potrebna da bi uneli ljubav
is thinking.
je misliti.
And that happens through the spirit,
I to se dešava kroz duha,
but must also involve the brain.
ali ono mora da uključi mozak.
Right? And then communicated to every part of the body through the nerves.
I ono komunicira kroz sve delove tela koristeći nerve.
Can you create the oxygen that your lungs need to breathe for you to survive?
Da li vi možete da stvorite kiseonik kojim je potreban za pluća?
No, you can't.
Ne, ne možete.
You must get oxygen that resides outside of you.
Vi morate da uzmete kiseonik koji je van vas.
You can't create oxygen.
Vi ne možete da stvorite kiseonik.
Can you create the water that you need to drink in order to survive?
Da li možete da kreirate vodu koja je potrebna da pijete?
No, you can't.
Ne.
What about the food?
A hranu?
No, you can't create that either.
Ne možete to da stvorite.
Now, a farmer might be listening or watching and saying, oh, we can make food.
Znači, poljoprivrednik možda sad sluša i kaže, mi možemo da napravimo hranu.
But let me give you a potato that has been baked in the oven, fried in the pan.
Ajde da vam dam jedan krompir koji je ispržen u rerni ili ispohovan.
Right? And now you plant that in your field.
I ajde ga sada zasadite u vaše polje.
How many potatoes are you going to create?
Koliko ćete vi krompira da stvorite?
None.
Nijedan.
Right? All you're doing is participating in the already existing life cycle of the plant.
Jedino što vi radite, vi učestvujete u ciklusu biljke.
Right? Can you create the warmth that you need environmentally in order for you to live?
Da li možete da kreirate toplotu u sredini u kojoj živite?
No, you can't.
Ne, ne možete.
Can you create the sunshine?
Da li možete da stvorite sunčevu svetlost?
No.
Ne, ne možete.
And can you create sleep?
Da li možete da kreirate spavanje?
No.
Ne.
You can only wait for it.
Vi možete samo da čekate na to.
Just ask somebody that has insomnia.
Samo pitajte nekoga ko ima nesanicu.
They will tell you you cannot create sleep.
Reći će vam da ne možete da stvorite san.
So can you create the love that you must think in order for you to live?
Da li možete da kreirate ljubav kada mislite koja je potrebna za život?
The answer is
Odgovor je
no.
ne možete.
You can't create that either.
Vi ne možete to da stvorite.
Can you have health if you have the wrong substance?
Da li možete da imate zdravlje ako imate pogrešne materijale?
Even though you have the right action.
Iako imate pravu funkciju.
Well, for example,
Na primer,
you breathe oxygen,
vi udišete kiseonik,
you will have health.
imaćete zdravlje.
But if you breathe carbon monoxide,
Ako udišete ugljen monoksid,
it will kill you.
to će vas ubiti.
The same action of breathing
Ista funkcija disanja
with the wrong substance, carbon monoxide,
sa pogrešnom supstancom kao što je ugljen monoksid,
that will kill you.
će vas ubiti.
Now, you can drink water,
Možete da pijete vodu,
and that will maintain health.
to će vam održati zdravlje,
But if you drink antifreeze,
ali ako pijete antifriz,
it will kill you.
to će vas ubiti.
The same action of drinking
Ista funkcija pijenja
with the wrong substance
sa pogrešnim supstancama
will kill you.
će vas ubiti.
You can eat an apple,
Možete da pojedete jabuku,
and it will bring you health.
to će vam doneti zdravlje.
But if you eat rat poison,
A ako jedete mišomor,
it will kill you.
to će vas ubiti.
The same action of eating
Ista funkcija jedenja
with the wrong source
s pogrešnim izvorom
will bring death.
dovešće do smrti.
And you can think good thoughts
I možete da imate dobre misli
which are based upon love,
koje su zasnovane na ljubavi
and those will maintain good health.
i one će vam održati dobro zdravlje.
But if we think bad thoughts,
Ali ako razmišljamo o lošim mislima
not based upon love,
koje nisu zasnovane na ljubavi,
it can kill us.
to može da nas ubije.
The same action of thinking
Ista funkcija razmišljanja
with the wrong source
s pogrešnim izvorom
can kill you.
može da vas ubije.
So only if we have the right action
Jedino ako imamo pravu radnju
with the right source
sa pravim izvorom,
can we expect to have health.
možemo da očekujemo da imamo zdravlje.
Because if we have the right source
Ako imamo pogrešnu izvor,
but the wrong action,
ali pogrešnu radnju, a pravi izvor,
overeating,
prejedanje,
starving oneself,
da se izgladnjujemo,
holding your breath,
da zadržavamo naš vazduh,
it will lead to dysfunction and death.
to će voditi do bolesti i smrti.
If we have the right action
Ako imamo prave radnje,
but the wrong source.
ali pogrešan izvor,
Poisons, toxins, and so on.
otrove, toksine i tako dalje,
It will lead to dysfunction and death.
to će voditi do bolesti i smrti.
And if we have the wrong action,
Ili ako imamo pogrešne radnje,
like overeating,
kao prejedanje,
with the wrong source,
sa pogrešnim izvorom,
like rat poison,
kao što je mišomor,
we will die faster.
brže ćemo da umremo.
Right? That makes sense.
To je logično.
Makes sense. So when we seriously think about the various needs that we have,
I kad sagledamo naše razne potrebe koje su nam potrebne,
we learn something about ourselves.
mi saznajemo, upoznajemo nešto o nama.
Can you create that which you need?
Da li možete da stvorite ono što vam je potrebno?
No, you can't.
Ne možete.
Because if you could,
Da možete,
it wouldn't be a need of yours.
to ne bi bila vaša potreba.
Your body cannot create what it needs,
Telo ne može da stvori ono što mu je potrebno
and your spirit cannot create what it
i
needs.
duh ne može da stvori ono što mu je potrebno.
Do you need love?
Da li je vama potrebna ljubav?
The answer is yes.
Odgovor je da.
Right? Then can you create or produce love?
Da li vi onda možete da stvorite ili proizvedete ljubav?
The answer is
Odgovor je
no,
ne.
you can't.
Ne možete.
Right? Because if you could,
Da možete,
it wouldn't be a need of ours.
to ne bi bila vaša potreba.
Is this just your problem and mine?
Da li je ovo samo moj i vaš problem?
Or is this a problem for all people?
Ili je ovo problem celog čovečanstva?
It's a problem for everyone.
To je problem čitavog čovečanstva, svih ljudi.
Everyone needs love,
Svakome je potrebna ljubav,
so therefore they can't produce love.
zato oni ne mogu da proizvedu ljubav.
Now, what kind of love do you need?
Ali kakva je vama ljubav potrebna?
Do you need a love that is personal
Da li je vama potrebna ljubav koja je lična
or that's impersonal?
ili bezlična?
Do you need a love that is pure
Ljubav koja je čista
or is corrupted?
ili iskvarena?
Do you need a love that is unlimited
Ljubav koja je neograničena
or is limited?
ili ograničena?
Well, I have talked to many audiences,
Ja sam govorio ispred puno ljudi.
and what they tell me
Ono što mi oni uvek govore,
is that they need a love that is personal, pure, and unlimited.
kažu da je ljubav koja je njima potrebna treba da bude lična, čista i neograničena.
That's the kind of love that we need.
To je ljubav koja je nama potrebna.
Natural selection
Prirodna selekcija
is the process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring.
Znači, proces u kojem organizmi bolje se prilagođavaju svom okruženju, imaju tendenciju da prežive i da daju više potomstva.
Right. So you have a bird that develops a mutation and its beak changes.
Znači, imate pticu koja je imala neku mutaciju i njen kljun se promenio.
Now it's more able to eat the seeds of a particular fruit,
I sad je ona u većoj mogućnosti da jede seme neke biljke
and it passes that beak shape on to its children.
i on taj oblik kljuna daje svoje deci
And they have advantage over their neighbors.
i oni imaju prednost nad svojim susedima,
They can eat better,
oni mogu više da jedu
and they reproduce better.
i bolje se reprodukuju
And eventually, the population over time changes,
i posle dužeg vremenskog perioda populacija se menja
right? So that it develops that beneficial quality.
i on razvije tu dobru kvalitetu.
That is adaptation,
To se zove adaptacija.
right? Now, and that represents natural selection.
I to predstavlja prirodnu selekciju.
Now, what happens
Šta se dešava
if you introduce to a species
ako vi jednim stvorenjima predstavite nešto,
a need for which there is no supply?
neku potrebu, a vi ne možete, ne postoji da ispunite tu potrebu.
For example,
Na primjer,
you have an animal
imate životinju,
and it has a mutation,
ima mutaciju
and the mutation causes the animal to need kryptonite.
I ta mutacija je takva da je njoj potreban kriptonit.
Kryptonite exists in the movies,
Kripton postoji samo u filmovima
right? From Superman's,
i od Supermana,
right? But it doesn't exist in reality.
ali u stvarnosti on ne postoji.
So if that creature develops the need for kryptonite,
I ako to stvorenje zaželi, ima potrebu za kriptonom,
but there is no kryptonite,
ali kripton ne postoji,
what will happen to that creature?
šta će se desiti s tim stvorenjem?
It will die.
On će umreti.
That's right, it will die.
Umreće.
If you create a need
Ako stvorite potrebu,
without providing a supply for what it needs,
a ne date im ono što im je potrebno,
you have just created death.
vi ste stvorili smrt.
Right? Now, human beings
Ljudska bića
have needed love
je njima bila potrebna ljubav.
for at least the last 4 or 5,000 years.
Bilo im je potrebno zadnjih 4 do 5.000 godina,
Because the writings we have from Egypt and India and so on
jer pisanja koje možemo da pročitamo iz Egipta ili iz Indije
show that there's a need for love.
nam pokazuju da ima potreba ljudi za ljubav.
But our species is around 4 or 5,000 years later,
Ali mi kao bića 4-5.000 godina kasnije
and we have not died yet.
i još nismo umrli,
So that means
što znači
there has to be a source of love,
mora da postoji izvor ljubavi
and that source of love is exactly the love that we need,
i taj izvor ljubavi upravo ono što nama treba.
or else we would have died.
Ili bi i mi umrli.
So what is that source of love?
I šta je taj izvor ljubavi?
A love that is personal,
Ljubav koja je lična,
a love that is pure,
ljubav koja je čista
a love that is unlimited.
i ljubav koja je neograničena.
Well, we'll get back to that.
Vratit ćemo se ka tome.
Can someone else breathe for me?
Da li neko drugi može da diše za mene?
If I'm starving for breath,
Ako ja imam nedostatak daha,
can you breathe faster and breathe for me?
da li vi možete brže da dišete za mene?
No.
Ne.
No, you can't breathe for me.
Ne možete da dišete za mene.
I must breathe for myself.
Ja moram da dišem za sebe.
It's only the oxygen that I breathe that
Jedino
will
kiseonik-
benefit my body.
Jedino kiseonik koji ja udišem utiče na moje telo.
Can someone else drink for me?
Da li neko drugi može da pije za mene?
I'm thirsty, so you take a drink?
Ja sam žedan, da li vi možete da pijete za mene?
No, that doesn't work.
Ne, to ne radi.
Can someone else eat for me?
Da li neko drugi može da jede za mene?
I'm starving, and so you eat a meal?
Ja sam gladan i vi jedete obrok.
Oh, that won't help me.
To mi neće pomoći.
I must eat myself.
Ja moram sam da jedem.
And then that will benefit me.
I to će da meni koristi.
Only my actions,
Jedino moje radnje,
not the actions of someone else,
a ne radnje nekog drugog,
affect my health.
utiču na moje zdravlje.
That makes sense, right?
Je vam to logično, zar ne?
Right. Another human being cannot be the source of that which I as a human being need.
Znači, drugo ljudsko biće ne može da mi bude izvor onoga što mi kao ljudskom biću treba.
Because they need that same thing too.
Jer je to i njima samim potrebno.
They cannot be the source.
Oni ne mogu da budu izvor.
So can another person be my source of love?
Da li druga osoba može da bude moj izvor ljubavi?
No,
Ne,
because they need it too.
jer je to i njima potrebno.
So let's imagine
Hajmo da zamislimo
that you have a neighbor that comes over.
da imate komšiju koji dođe
And they're one of those neighbors that comes over frequently.
i to je komšija koji često dolazi
And so she comes over and she knocks on the door,
i ona dolazi, pokuca na vrata,
right? And you open the door
vi otvorite vrata
and she asks for a few eggs.
i ona pita za par jaja,
You give them to her.
dajete im.
She comes back later.
Ona se pokuca i opet,
She wants some milk.
ona sada želi neko
You give her
mleko.
some milk.
Evo neko mleko.
She comes back later.
Dolazi nazad,
She wants some flour.
želi neko cveće.
You give her flour.
Dajete joj cveće.
She comes back later.
Vraća se nazad, pokuca.
She wants some sugar.
Hoće šećera.
You give her some sugar.
Dajete joj šećera.
She comes back later.
Sad dolazi kasnije opet.
She wants a mixing bowl and a spoon.
Hoće mikser i kašiku.
So you give her a mixing bowl and a spoon.
Dajete joj mikser i kašiku.
You soon find out that you're her grocery store.
I vi na kraju saznate da ste vi njena prodavnica.
Right? Well, one day she comes over.
Jednoga dana ona dolazi kod vas.
You can't ignore the knock.
Vi ne možete da ignorišete kucanje.
You go to the door.
Idete na vrata
And she is desperate.
i ona je očajna.
She has discovered that her child has a terminal condition.
Ona je saznala da njeno dete ima ozbiljnu ili neizlečivu bolest.
And that condition has been universally fatal.
I ta bolest je univerzalno smrtna.
But in the last year or so,
Ali u zadnjih godinu dana
a center in China has discovered how to treat this condition.
jedan centar u Kini je otkrio kako da leči tu bolest.
And they have a 50% success rate.
Imaju 50% uspešnosti.
And your friend has discovered this,
I vaš prijatelj je to otkrio,
your neighbor,
vaš komšija,
and she wants to take her child to that center to treat them.
i ona želi da odvede svoje dete tamo da ga tretiraju.
Now, the treatment only costs 10 million euros.
A tretman toga košta 10 miliona evra.
And because it's China, you have to pay in advance.
A pošto je Kina, vi morate da platite unapred.
And she comes to you because she wants 10 million euros.
I ona dolazi kod vas i traži od vas 10 miliona evra.
Are you going to give her those 10 million euros?
Da li će vi dati tih 10 miliona evra?
Are you?
Da li ćete?
No?
Nećete?
You're not going to give it to her?
Nećete da je date?
You're so cruel.
Vi ste tako grubi.
Oh, you mean you can't give it to her?
Mislite, ja ne mogu da dam?
Why not?
Zašto ne?
Oh, because you don't have it.
Zato što vi to nemate.
You cannot give what you do not have.
Vi ne možete da date ono što nemate.
So maybe you have a few hundred euros that you can give her.
Možda imate par stotina evra koje možete da date.
And so you do so.
I vi to učinite.
But she comes back later.
Ali se ona vraća nazad.
And she wants the rest of the 10 million euros.
Ona sad hoće ostatak od 10 miliona evra.
She comes back later.
I opet se vraća.
She wants the rest of the 10 million euros.
Hoće ona ostatak od 10 miliona evra.
She keeps coming back and coming back, wanting the rest of the 10 million.
Ona se stalno vraća, hoće ostatak od 10 miliona.
How do you eventually feel?
Kako se vi konačno osjećate?
Well, you feel frustrated.
Vi se osjećate isfrustrirano.
Because you don't have what she needs.
Vi nemate ono što je njoj potrebno.
And she's frustrated.
I ona je frustrirana.
Because she's not getting what she needs.
Jer ona ne dobija ono što je potrebno.
This is how it is in our relationships.
Ovo je onako kako je u našim odnosima.
And it's all because we don't recognize the correct source.
To je sve zato što mi ne prepoznajemo pravi izvor.
We don't recognize the correct source.
Mi ne prepoznajemo pravi izvor.
When you believe that your spouse should fulfill your need for love,
kada vi verujete da vaš supružnik treba da ispuni vašu potrebu za ljubavlju,
you will go to your spouse
vi ćete ići ka supružniku
to be filled.
da budete ispunjeni.
But your spouse needs the same love you're going to them to take.
Ali vaš supružniku je potrebna ista ljubav koja je vama potrebna da uzme.
And your spouse believes that they should be able to supply your need.
A supružnik misli da može da ispuni vašu potrebu.
And so you go looking to your spouse for what you need.
I odete kod vašeg supružnika za vašu potrebu.
But your spouse can't provide it.
Ali vaš supružnik vama to ne može da da.
You get frustrated.
Vi se isfrustrirate.
They get frustrated.
I oni se isfrustriraju.
Why?
Zašto?
Because you're going to the wrong source.
Jer vi idete ka pogrešnom izvoru.
This happens all the time in our relationships.
To se stalno dešava u našim odnosima.
It's a universal problem.
To je univerzalni problem.
So whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with oxygen?
Čija je odgovornost mene da budem ispunjen kiseonikom?
It's mine.
Moja.
I must breathe it.
Ja moram da ga dišem.
Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with water?
Čija je odgovornost za mene da popijem vode?
It's mine.
To je moja.
I must drink it.
Ja moram da pijem.
Whose responsibility is it for me to be filled with proper nutrients?
Čija je odgovornost da se ja ispunim odgovarajućim nutrijentima?
It's mine.
Moja.
I must eat it.
Ja moram da jedem.
Have you ever felt less than 100% full of love?
Da li ste ikad bili manje od 100% ispunjeni ljubavlju?
Have you even felt empty when it comes to love?
Da li ste nekad bili prazni kad je u pitanju ljubav?
I have a question for you.
Imam pitanje za vas.
Whose responsibility is it for you to be filled with love?
Čija je odgovornost da vi budete ispunjeni ljubavlju?
Is it someone else
Nečija druga
or is it yours?
ili vaša?
It's your responsibility.
To je vaša odgovornost.
You must take the love you need,
Vi morate da uzmete ljubav koja vam je potrebna,
which is a function of thought,
koji je deo misli,
that you might be full.
da bi bili ispunjeni.
But where do you go in order to take that love?
Gde da uzmem ljubav koja mi je potrebna?
That's a really good question.
To je dobro pitanje.
God
Bog
is the source of love,
je izvor ljubavi.
right? God is the love that we need.
Bog je ljubav koja nam je potrebna.
He is personal.
On je ličan.
He is pure.
On je čist.
He is unending.
On je bez kraja.
And the love that you need
I ljubav koja nam je potrebna
is the love that he has.
je ljubav koju on ima.
Love does not come from humans.
Ljubav ne dolazi od ljudi.
No human being is the source of love.
Nijedan čovek, ljudsko biće, nije izvor ljubavi.
God is.
Bog je to.
And so we need him.
I on nam je potreban.
And I like to use this analogy.
Ja želim da koristim ovo poređenje.
It is like God owns a buffet restaurant.
To je kao da Bog je vlasnik jednog restorana koji ima švedski sto.
And this buffet restaurant has various dishes in it.
I ovaj restoran švedski sto ima razne tanjire.
It has things like grace,
Ima nešto kao što je blagodat,
security,
sigurnost,
belonging,
pripadanje,
truth,
istina,
mercy,
milost,
acceptance,
prihvaćen,
justice,
pravda,
and freedom.
sloboda.
These are all various different aspects of love.
To su razni aspekti ljubavi.
And let's imagine that you have been fasting for a while,
Hajde da zamislimo da ste postali na tašte
and it's time to break the fast.
i vreme da prekinete taj post.
And you go to the restaurant.
I odete u restoran,
Oh, you're ready to eat.
spremni ste da jedete,
You grab your plate and your bowl and your utensils,
uzmete tanjir, času i kašik i viljuške
and you go through the restaurant looking at all of the different options.
i ulazite u restoran i gledate sve razne opcije.
They're all healthy.
Sve je to zdravo,
It's all tasty.
sve je ukusno
And you go through sniffing and seeing.
i prođete kroz gledanje i mirišanje
But then you leave your bowl and your plate and your utensils there.
i ostavite tanjir, času i kašik i viljuške
And you go outside
i odete napolje
and you're still hungry.
i dalje ste gladni.
Who's responsible that you're still hungry?
Ko je odgovoran zašto ste vi ostali gladni?
You are.
Vi ste.
It's not the restaurant's responsibility to feed you.
Nije odgovornost restorana da vas nahrani,
It's their responsibility to make sure the food is available.
njihova odgovornost je da vam oni dostave hranu.
But it's your responsibility to take of the food and eat it.
Ali je vaša odgovornost da vi uzmete hranu i da jedete.
The Bible tells us about God and his love.
Biblija nam govori o njegovoj ljubavi.
And in the book of Hebrews,
I u poslanici Jevrejima,
God tells us,
on nam kaže,
I will never leave you nor forsake you.
neću te ostaviti, niti ću odstupiti.
That means that God will never close the restaurant.
To znači da Bog nikad neće zatvoriti restoran.
It's always open.
Uvijek je otvoren.
In Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah,
U knjizi proroka Jeremije,
he tells us,
on nam kaže,
I have loved you with an everlasting love.
ljubim te ljubavlju večnom.
That tells us that the restaurant is never empty.
To nam kaže da restoran nikad nije prazan.
It's always full.
Uvijek je pun.
And in the book of Isaiah,
I u Isaiji,
he tells us,
on kaže,
everyone who thirsts, come to the waters.
svi koji ste žedni, hodite na vodu.
And you who have no money, come, buy and eat.
I koji nemate novca, kupite.
Yes, come buy wine and milk without money and without price.
Kaže, kupite i jedite bez novca i bez plate, vina i mleka.
This means that God has already paid the price for the food.
To znači da je Bog već platio cenu hrane.
It's free.
Besplatno je.
Right? So his restaurant is always open, it's always full, it's always free.
Znači, njegov restoran je uvek otvoren, uvek napunjen i on je besplatan.
At any time you can come and you can eat from that restaurant.
I vi svaki put možete da dođete da jedete iz tog restorana.
And you can fill yourself with that love.
I može da se ispunite tom ljubavlju.
But God's buffet is not the only one available.
Ali Božji švedski sto nije jedini koji je dostupan.
Others offer buffets too.
I drugi imaju svoje švedske stolove.
Not buffets of love,
Ne taj švedski sto ljubavi,
but buffets of selfishness.
ali to je švedski sto sebičnosti.
And those buffets offer things like power, pleasure, popularity, and possessions.
Znači, ovo su drugačiji švedski stolovi koji nude moć, uživanje, popularnost, imovinu.
But it also brings things like betrayal, abuse, deceit, and control.
Ali oni isto dodaju i izdaju, prevaru, kontrolu, zlostavljanje.
Our human nature
Naša ljudska priroda
naturally eats from the buffet of others.
obično jede iz bufea ili iz švedskog stola drugih.
We naturally eat off of this table.
Mi prirodno jedemo sa ovog stola.
You have heard the phrase,
Vi ste čuli frazu,
you are what you eat.
ono što jedete,
Well, it's very true from a spiritual sense.
isto je i sa duhovne perspektive.
Have you ever been in a situation
Da li ste nekad bili u situaciji
where you're with a loved one
kada ste sa voljenima
and they get frustrated,
i oni su isfrustirani
and immediately you get frustrated?
i jedanput se i vi isfrustirate?
You know why that is?
Znate zašto je to?
Because you're eating off of their table.
Jer jedete sa njihovog stola.
And what you eat,
Ono što jedete,
you become like.
vi postanete takvi.
Oh, so we like to make them good.
I mi želimo da učinimo to dobrim.
We want to make them good tables to eat from.
Mi želimo da to učinimo dobar sto da bude.
So we want them to be happy.
I želimo da budu srećni,
We want them to give well.
da bude im bolje,
We want all of that
da bude sve to.
so that when we eat from their table,
Jer kad jedemo sa tog stola,
we'll get those good things.
dobit ćemo te dobre stvari.
But when they don't behave well,
Ali kada se ne ponašaju dobro,
when they're angry,
kad su ljuti,
when they're depressed,
depresivni,
well, guess what?
znate šta se dešava?
We get angry and depressed too
I mi postanemo ljuti i depresivni.
because we're eating from their buffet.
Jer jedemo sa njihovog stola švedskog.
But we have a choice.
Ali mi imamo izbor.
Now, before this time, we might not have known we had a choice.
Do ovog trenutka mi nismo znali da li imamo izbor,
But we do have a choice.
ali imamo izbor.
We can choose which table we eat from.
Mi možemo da izaberemo sa kog stola ćemo da jedemo.
And God's table
I Božji sto
is a really good one.
je stvarno jako dobar.
It has exactly the love that we need.
I ima upravo onu ljubav koja nam je potrebna.
And when you eat from that table,
I kada jedete sa tog stola,
you don't have to eat from these tables.
vi ne morate da jedete sa ovog drugog stola.
The only person that can control you
Jedina osoba koja može da vas kontroliše
is the one whose table you eat from.
je osoba sa kog stola jedete.
So if you are eating from other people's tables,
I ako jedete sa stolova drugih ljudi,
they can manipulate you.
oni mogu da vas manipulišu.
But if you're only eating from God's table,
Ali ako jedete sa Božjeg stola,
they can't manipulate you.
oni ne mogu da vas manipulišu.
And God will not manipulate you against your will.
I Bog vas neće manipulisati protiv vaše volje.
He gives you freedom.
On vam daje slobodu.
And he has exactly the love that you need.
I on upravo ima ljubav koja je potrebna.
This is vitally important.
Ovo je od vitalne važnosti.
You don't have to succumb to your surroundings or your circumstances.
Vi niste uslovljeni onome što vas okružuje i situacijama.
You can choose which table you take from.
Vi možete izaberete sa kog stola uzimate.
And when you take from this table,
I kad uzmete sa ovog stola,
you become loving.
vi postajete voljeni,
And you give good things to others.
date dobre stvari drugima.
Because what you give reveals where you took from.
Jer zavisnosti šta date, to govori od koga ste dobili, odakle ste uzeli.
I'm Dr. Sandoval,
Ja sam dr. Sandoval
and this is the law of life.
i ovo je zakon života.
And we look forward to seeing you next time.
I vidimo se sljedeći put.